Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today I'm going to show you how I made these quick and easy greeting cards using a really fun technique that I haven't used in a while, and maybe you've used it in the past but forgotten about it. So what you're going to need are some water-based markers. They can be any brand you have. I'll be using the paper-friendly markers by Ohuhu, but if you have Tombos or Mementos, or you might even be able to use Crayola. Sometimes they're a little too watery, but give it a try with whatever you have. And you're going to need some stamps that have a lot of solid area, and these rubber stamps by Rubbernecker work great for this. Now, unfortunately, these stamps are no longer available. Rubbernecker has rebranded, and now they're called Brass and Bliss, and I think they're just doing clear stamps now. But dig through your stash and try to find some solid rubber stamps that have botanical designs work great, but just any design that has a lot of rubber area. Another brand of stamps that has a lot of stamps that work great for this technique would be Local King rubber stamps. And in fact, I was reignited in passion for this technique by seeing them do this at a stamp show. So I will link to them in the video description in case you don't have any stamps at home that will work for this. They have tons to choose from. So what I like to do first is to find a color that will work with most of the stamp, like a really pale, like the pale green, and color most of the area with that. Then I like to dab on a darker green or a darker version of the color just to give it some shading. Now for the flowers here on this thistle, I'm doing kind of like a mauve purple color, which is kind of like a, I don't know, kind of a fuchsia color. Then I'm going to go in with a brighter purple, more of like a royal purple, and dabbing in some shadow with that. And this is real time. I'm going to keep this section right here real time, and then we'll speed up the other ones just so you can get some color ideas. And then I'm just going to dab in some black. Now that's up to you whether you like to do that or not. It can give it a little bit more drama. I do it sometimes and sometimes I don't. But that's something that Lisa at Local King Rubber Stamps does, and she gets some really fantastic looks with that. I've pre-cut some smooth cardstock to smaller pieces. A lot of them are 3x4, but then you end up with some smaller pieces when you cut your cardstock down to that size. So I just brought them all over. Now here I'm breathing on the stamp just to make sure the ink is nice and moist. With these paper-friendly markers, I find they're juicy enough that I don't need to breathe on them, but sometimes it takes you a while to color an image, especially if it's a larger stamp. And see how long I'm holding this down? This is real time. So it just makes sure that everything is nice and moist. And there you can see what we get from that impression. And we're going to do this again here. Again, I'm starting with my lightest color. You always want to work light to dark because that's going to keep you from contaminating your marker tips. And if you do contaminate a marker tip, like maybe you go in with a purple and you color over an area that had black or green, scribble it on scrap paper until the color off the nib is coming clean again. Even if it's stained, it will still be fine. But you want to do that rather than just capping it back up. That way you don't end up getting that color permanently in the marker. And I'm going through the same process here. So if you want more of a watercolory look with your images, you can spray them with just a fine mist sprayer. The one that you can see on screen is one I picked up on Amazon for about $6 or $7, I think. And it's I think it's meant for like hairstylists to use, but it works great for misting your rubber so that you get a nice watercolory effect. It doesn't get too splotchy or anything. So I highly recommend those. I'll try to link everything I can find in the video description. But like I said, those stamps are no longer available, but I'm sure you get something in your stash, like maybe a botanical stamp, like a leaf. That would be really pretty with this technique. And there you go. Look at this, how it's a little bit more watercolory looking. Now I'm going to speed up the rest of this footage so you can see some other ideas of what I did with these products. This is one of my favorite techniques to get somebody into rubber stamping with, because one of the biggest expenses you're going to face when you get into rubber stamping is ink pads. And you can get a set of these markers. I think the markers are going for around $30 a set, but you don't need to get a big set. And it's going to last you quite a while, and you can have pretty much of every color. And even in a pinch, if say you want to do a stamp and you just want to have black, right? You want to have a black outline and you don't have a black stamp pad, you can use the marker. So it's a really great way to get that many colors without a lot of expense. And these water-based markers, if you say like to color with alcohol markers, maybe you're a coloring book enthusiast and you're like, think I'd like to get into rubber stamping. You can use these markers with coloring books as well as with stamping, but you could use these markers to ink up a line outline stamp it, and then color with the alcohol markers, and it's not going to smear. So that's a nice thing about these water-based markers, is that they're not going to get smudged with alcohol markers. And if you already have those for another hobby and you want to get into stamping, it's just a kind of a natural progression. Because when I got into scrapbooking and stamping, I had been painting for years, for my whole childhood and young adult life. So I had a lot of products that I could just transfer over to using in card making and scrapbooking. And I think a lot of us are hobby crafters. And if you can find ways to take your stash from one hobby and bring it over into a new hobby, it really cuts down on the expense of that new hobby. Like maybe you like to do quilting, maybe you like to do knitting or crochet. The fibers, the fabrics that you use for those, they can be embellishments. If you have been scrapbooking for a long time and you want to get into card making, I feel like those are such complementary hobbies, because all the scraps from scrapbooking are the perfect size for using on your greeting cards. So look at what you have, look at packaging waste. Like I'm always looking at boxes before I throw them away and to see if I can use anything as an embellishment. Like I love to drink tea, and a lot of times the artwork on boxes of tea is so pretty that I will save that. Or clothing tags, I'll save those. Or ribbons that might come in like on gifts, like maybe you buy a blanket and it has a pretty grosgrain ribbon on it, or some twill tape or something like that. Saving those little things, and just maybe keeping a drawer. I call it my collage art drawer. Saving things like that really can cut down on the expense of your card making, and also it can make your cards look completely unique and completely different than everybody else's. And in a world where it seems like we will follow a tutorial and we need to get everything that artist has and create it exactly and create the exact same cards, I think that gets kind of boring after a while. I love putting my own likes and things that I've saved and things that are unique on my card designs to make it more my personality. And I think that's why I love using these older stamps that I've had in my stash for a long time, because it's kind of, I don't know, it is kind of neat when you have something that nobody else has, because then you're going to have a unique design. But also buy what you like. Don't buy what I like or what some other influencer likes or some other crafter online likes, because if you don't like it, when the trend is gone, you're not going to want to use the products anymore. So, and another thing I would recommend is when you figure out how you want to store your stamps, I like to store my stamps in binders. Like, if you go to Sam's Club or the office supply store, you get those binders, 3-ring binders. I put page protectors in there, and that's how I store all of my rubber stamps. And I store them by theme. So when I want silhouette florals, or I call them watercolor florals because I do this technique with them, I look for those and I store them all in the same binder, and that's where I can find them. And then I get ideas when I flip through the binders. And you can add accents to your stamped pieces too if they're not bright enough with the markers. They're just so versatile, and I absolutely think they're a great product to start with when you begin your stamping journey. And here's how they look just with that technique done. Very pretty. Depending on how much water, you'll get a different look. Now I want to add a little pattern to the background. So I'm taking this large text stamp and I'm using a light marker to color it in. And then I'm going to breathe on the stamp to re-moisten the ink on that big background stamp. And then I'm just going to, after I breathe on it, put the panel down, face down on the rubber. So I've got the stamp rubber side up on my table. Because it's big like this, it's going to be fine. And then I'm taking a piece of scrap paper, laying it down over my stamped panel and just rubbing on the back of it to kind of pull up that print onto my cardstock there. And that's going to keep my hands clean and hopefully keep me from getting inky smudges on the background. So there we have our stamp with that added text in the background. Now, if you have some ink pads, it's a lot quicker just to ink it up with an ink pad. But if you don't, the markers will work just fine for that. Now, this color I think is a little bit darker, but we're going to do that same technique on another background because I thought this would be pretty for a Christmas card, having those red berries in there. And you can really alter this. Go with a darker ink if you want more of a bold impact. Go with a lighter ink if you just want a really soft look. This one's a little bit darker. I think it looks really pretty, but not as subtle as the first one. So by all means, let your taste be the guide. For the rest of these examples, I'm using just a Thinking of You text block stamp here. I use this one all the time. It's so great to have a really nice basic text stamp. And I think that looks so good with that really light tan ink on the rest of these botanical cards. So like I said, experiment with what you have. A lot of times you don't know what's going to work until you try it. This is one of my favorite frugal time-saving tips. I save all the offcuts when I cut down white, cream, and craft cardstock, and then I will die cut a bunch of little sentiment banners from them. And so when I need a sentiment for a card, it's really easy. I grab this little set of sentiments from Paper Tray ink, and I just stamp a bunch of them out, and I keep them handy when I'm making cards. So I'm stamping birthday wishes with sympathy, thank you on these, and I'm going to add them to today's cards. You could also add a little baggie with a bunch of extra sentiments in case somebody wants to use the card for a different occasion if you're making a set for somebody as a gift. They make great gifts around the holidays for people who love to send cards. When choosing paper for your card making, I highly recommend getting basics like plain cardstock, a good weight plain cardstock, and I also recommend getting natural elements like mulberry paper. I picked this up at a dollar store in the gift wrap section decades ago, and I am still working through it. Mulberry paper is wonderful. It doesn't go out of style, and it is so easy to work with. So what I'm going to do here, once I clear off my desk a bit, is I am going to wet tear this paper to fit my my sentiments here. So what I like to do is pick one of these colors. Now, since it's neutral, mulberry paper is very natural and neutral looking, so pretty much it's going to go with everything, but since I do have a few shades, I am going to pick and choose. I set down my focal point, then I take a brush with some water, and I draw a box around it. And this is going to loosen up and weaken the paper fibers so that I can tear it to size. And this gives you such a beautiful look. It looks so kind of romantic and natural, and like I said, it goes with everything. I bought this paper decades ago and I'm still using it. It's still matching, and it's just such a pretty effect. So let me show you how easy this is going to tear. You just need to let it soak in for a few seconds so that the papers can get kind of broken down a little bit, but look at that. You could also do this with any sort of really soft rice paper. That will work as well. But I love this with the inclusions in it. I think that's so pretty. And you could buy packs of this on Amazon as well in case you don't have a mulberry paper stash. But I just think it's such a lovely effect. If you have a large sheet of mulberry paper and you have a lot of panels that are similar size, you can do many at once. This is such a forgiving technique. And if you do have like a piece of bark or an element that's kind of going between two pieces, it's pretty easy to tear that as well. So don't worry, and don't try to make it perfect. Having it a little bit wonky actually looks much better in your cards. Now, let that dry completely before proceeding on to the next step. The instruction of these cards is very simple, and I definitely think any beginner to card making can do this. Now, if you want to add a little bit of extra flair and you have ink pads, use whatever color you used for the background text to ink up the edges of your elements. If you don't have ink pads and you didn't do that step, that's fine. Just skip it. You don't need to do this. But I think it does add a really nice effect. So if you have a light tan color, it'll be great for that. If you don't worry about it. So if you have your panel, if it's a little bit large, you can pull off little bits that overhang if that bothers you, or you can leave it on. It's completely up to you. There's no right or wrong way. So don't fret about these little details. And I like to kind of lay out the card and see if I like the placement before I add adhesive. Now, adhering mulberry paper can be a little bit tricky. You could use a glue stick, but I find sometimes glue sticks are unreliable unless you have a permanent glue stick. So what I'm using here is double-sided tape, and I'm putting it on the card base just within where I know that mulberry paper is going to sit. This is a pretty strong double-sided tape, but of course, use whatever you have. And then I'm just going to press that down onto the tape. Now, the mulberry paper is opaque enough that that tape's not going to show through, but if you have a very delicate paper, you might want to try to hide that adhesive underneath where your panel is going to be, just to kind of keep that in mind. A great embellishment is natural jute twine. You can get that in any garden store. You could get it at the dollar store in the craft or gardening or hardware section. It's a really nice natural look. You might even have some in your junk drawer at home for tying up plants. It works so good. And now I'm putting my adhesive on the cardstock, not the mulberry paper, because it doesn't like to stick on the mulberry paper as easily. So it just works a little bit better. You could also use a wet glue if that's what you have. I feel like when you get into card making, it can get very expensive if you're going out and buying every single thing for a project you want to make. So using what you already have is a great way to save some money. And a greeting card is not meant to last a lifetime. It's, meant to be given and enjoyed for a month or so on somebody's fridge or mantle, and then often it gets tossed. I do use acid-free products when possible just because I'll use it for scrapbooking too, so it makes sense just to have one type of product. But if you don't scrapbook as well, you might not have the need for those acid-free materials. So my cards will last the test of time if they're kept. I know some people do keep my cards, so that's nice, but I wouldn't make that your end-all be-all priority if you're getting into card making. Get in, enjoy, and then upgrade as you see fit. Now, you could wrap the twine around the center panel if you don't want to wrap it around the entire card. Like before you would adhere your stamped panel down, you could just wrap it around the stamped panel and go that way. It's up to you. See, there's a lot of versatility and a lot of adaptability with these supplies and with this design. And then I'm going to overlap the thank you sentiment over the twine and the panel. A design element that I find works really nice is clustering. That's when you overlap several elements. For some reason, it just looks very cohesive and it's very pleasant to look at. These are foam tape squares. They're left over from another project, and all the OG viewers of my channel are going to be probably cheering or taking a shot, I don't know, one or the other when they see these squares come out, because I've been using them since the beginning of my channel, basically. But they're just little foam dimensionals. They're great to use. If you have them, great. If you don't worry. You can get foam tape pretty affordably at different places. There you can see I did the twine around the panel. It's the same design, but just arrange them in different ways to get the look you want. And that's really all there is to it. I'm going to show you some still versions of these cards to help give you some inspiration. And I will post some still photos on my blog, thefrugalcrafter.wordpress.com, if you want to look at them a little bit longer. But I hope this inspires you to give card making a try and not to feel intimidated by needing all the things, because just get some stuff you like and start playing. That's really the best way to get into card making, in my opinion. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.